Sound design.
If you've set your subs up left-right, then you have already made a decision that you don't care about coverage.
Sound design. Sound Design Live is produced independently by me, Nathan Lively, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Welcome to Sound Design Live, the show to help you build your career as a sound engineer in the home of the world's first online career coaching program optimized for audio professionals. I'm Nathan Lively, and today I'm joined by Product Manager and Smaart Instructor at Rational Acoustics, Chris Tsanjoures. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, Nathan.
So I definitely want to talk to you about all of the cool things that Smaart can do and your experience at NAMM last month. But first of all, what is your most played reference track when listening to sound systems?
The music that I listen to on a PA system to reference that PA to what I know a song should sound like, and the music that I listen to in my car or when I'm having fun or at a party are not the same types of music. So,
are you afraid we're going to judge you?
I'm not afraid you're going to judge me, because most people are going to know this song, but I have to make it clear that to me there's a distinction between reference tracks and fun tracks. And
all right, so this is not a representation of your taste in music.
That's all I'm saying. So it's Somewhere Somebody by Jennifer Warren.
I know he's out there waiting for me, I know.
A female vocal and a male vocal and an upright bass guitar and some stuff in the top end, and it's fairly acoustic, and you know, if things are fighting with each other, it's really clear to me, and I know exactly what that track should sound like. Now, again, it's somewhat of a joke, because in my Smaart classes, you know, that's the song that I'll put on when we're listening to stuff, and it's like, I don't like this song, but if something isn't right about the way the song sounds like, I'm gonna know so much faster than if I listen to a song that I would like the way it sounds like on an AM radio, because I like that song. So that's my thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I was at the workshop with Merlin, he put on the song that I wasn't familiar with called Hunter, or the artist is called Hunter, and he just kind of played it on loop, and I said, oh, this is a nice song, and he's like, oh man, doing these workshops and working and using it all the time has killed it for me. Like, I hate it now.
Yeah. That's another song that I have. I believe I'm right in saying that they're the same artist. I could be wrong, but I believe that they're the same artist.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the Hunter is a common one. I mean, there's a handful of these songs that sort of go around and wind up in the same people's libraries, and you hear them, like, you know, at Music Mess a couple years ago, this booth across the way from us played Somewhere Somebody probably, you know, 35 times a day.
Oh my God.
And it's, you know, it becomes comical, but you know, so many people know that song. If it's not right, it's obvious to a lot of people.
And I think the really important thing that you mentioned there was that kind of remove the emotional connection, and then it turns into a tool. Yeah.
And I just looked it up. It is Jennifer Warren's, Warnes, and you're absolutely right. It is a tool for me and for other people as well. The artist is Aaron Neville, but the singer is Jennifer Warnes. Okay. The album that song is on is The Hunter. That's the title track from the album.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Chris, how did you get your first paying job in audio?
When I was in college, and I went to school for a recording degree with a minor in classical guitar, or not really minor, but that was what I had to study to be there. There was an email in the first semester, like September, that went around to all the students in the recording degree program, looking for someone to help doing sound at clubs around the area. I was like, yeah, I love doing sound, you know, that's what I'm here for. So I took a gig and showed up, got handed the keys to a van with a system inside of it. You know, it was like two 818s, two 12 and horn PV gray carpet boxes, a 24-channel Allen and Heath console with a bunch of outboard gear and 5 mixes on Yamaha wedges, and yeah, it was pretty much the first gig I did with that company. There was a guy that sent the original email, and he basically said, watch everything I do, ask questions on anything you don't understand. Next week I won't be here. And this is my first time doing anything like this, where
that's a lot for a first timer.
Yeah, and I was showing up, 18 years old at that point, into clubs that are 21 plus, doing cover bands that are a bunch of 40-something-year-old weekend warriors that have been doing it for years, and then I'm supposed to make sound happen when I don't even know how to mix anything. But that was sort of trial by fire, and I didn't really know what I was doing necessarily. But after a few months of that, I got introduced to a guy that does know what he's doing, and started working with a different company that gave me somewhat of a mentor in that company. So first job, driving all of our creation, 3 hours one way, 3 hours back, staying up all night to make $75 to work in some crappy club with a system that I don't know how to use.
I'm so glad you said that, because the conditions for an outsider sound terrible. Like, that sounds terrible, but there's some part of it that you must have loved, because you kept coming back, and now here you are.
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. It was so much fun, and I would take friends with me that were also in the program, or that weren't but were interested, and I would make them help me carry the boxes around, and
Smart.
throw them a couple bucks, or get give them a free drinks or whatever, and everyone gets something out of it, and that was sort of what started the spark, and realizing quickly that if you're doing stuff in practical sense, not just theoretical in a college, sort of controlled environment, if you're out there actually putting stuff together, you learn a lot faster. That was my big takeaway over the course of my college career, is how much faster I learned things, because I was not just doing stuff in college in the classroom. I was out there doing shows, and as college went, the shows got bigger, and my contacts grew and everything.
That's really interesting that you say that, because I get a lot of questions from people about where they should go to school, or what sort of education or certifications they should get. And I always say you should do both. Like, you should definitely do education, whatever you think is going to be appropriate for whatever the end result is that you want, but you should also be working at the same time, because working is really where you're going to find out the things that you need to learn. It's where really you're going to get the best education anyway.
Yeah, one of my professors calls it the shadow curriculum. Gabe Herman, who is a professor at the Hart School of Music, he was just recently interviewed in the Connecticut, Current, whatever the newspaper is there, and he had said something to the effect of, all the professors notice that the kids will group together, they'll form their own peer groups, and they'll do work outside of school, and they call this the shadow curriculum, and wherever you go, you need that shadow curriculum to really blossom anywhere you are, to give you a reason to be interested, and to keep your mind, like you said, thinking on what you don't know, to make sure that you pick it up when you have the opportunity to learn it, and then in the shadow curriculum, hone your skill.
Talking about honing your skill, Chris, looking back at your career so far, what do you think is one of the best decisions you made to get more of the work that you really love?
I don't know when I made the decision. Obviously, it was within the last 10 years, because I'm not that old. I'll be 30 this year.
Whoa.
It was somewhere in college around that time where I told myself I would never take a job that didn't directly involve audio or my field. Before that, if the summer came around, I would take like a waiter job, or do some sort of temp position, whatever work I could get. And I just said no. I just started saying no to that stuff, and would only look for jobs that were in audio, because at that point I'd been working for sound companies in college, and so right about time I got to my junior year of college, after my sophomore year, I had plenty of opportunity and work in audio that I didn't need to do something that was outside of the industry to make a few bucks. And I've just been really like flag in the sand about that. I'm direct, in a lot of ways, and if I think I can do a job, I'm going to make sure that the person hiring for that job knows that I'm capable, and that I'm the guy, and whatever. So I'm conscious about not straying out of the realm of things that are audio.
Chris, I want you to kind of make the case for Smaart. You're the product manager at Rational Acoustics. You teach these courses. Yeah. But I always have new people coming in who see the material and they think, what is this? Why should I care about this? So make the case for Smaart. Why should I care about the physics of audio and sound system optimization? I mean, I've got a good ear and I don't really need robots telling me how to do my job.
Hearing is in a lot of ways subjective. What you say sounds good and what I say sound good. We may agree at certain points. We may disagree at other points. You like some artists that I don't like, that sort of thing. You may like a speaker cabinet that I don't care for, because you find that it rigs better than XYZ brand or something silly like that. Now, with sound, when we measure audio, it's an objective thing, so we're objectively measuring the quality of transmission of sound. Hearing can't do that. Hearing is just going to hear what sound is. Your hearing also changes day to day. What if you wake up and you've got a cold and your equilibrium is off? Your hearing isn't where it normally is, but you still want to get the same exact result that you had the day before in the same system. So how do you objectively measure that system when the only tool that you have is already handicapped? Analysis becomes the natural fit there. There's a lot of proof in analysis as well. So, this system sounds great. This is what I want. Well, what do you like about that system? Why does it sound great? Why? What is it about this particular gear or setup or response that you love? How do you recreate that response or that sound that you love in a completely different environment in 5 minutes? Right. And the only answer is really with objective tools, because if you have a target that you want to reach, if you know the destination you're going, you don't get into a car to go to work and then forget where work is and just drive around aimlessly until you hope that you find yourself there. And that's sort of what I think of when I think of tuning by ear or doing anything by ear. It's like you kind of have an idea where you want to go, but you're not really sure how you're going to end up getting there. And so you just kind of start doing stuff, hoping that something sticks or something gets you there. Whereas that could take, who knows how proficient you are. I'm sure people get results that way. I just don't have the time, and I don't like not knowing either. I don't like having proof or data to support my claims. So with an analysis, you open up an analyzer, and it doesn't have to be Smaart. I mean, obviously that's where I live, but any analyzer, they're just tools. They're all going after the same basic end goal, which is to have good sound. Using that analyzer generally takes jobs that would otherwise take you an undefined amount of time into a point that you can knock out these tasks relatively quickly and work in a process that gets you consistent results day in and day out, and not just, oh, well, that show is really good, I wonder why, or that show really sucked, why wasn't it as good as the last one, or this, this didn't work out. Well, why not? Like and today, with the technology we have and the level of systems that we have, I mean, loudspeaker technology has just grown exponentially over the past even 10 years. So there's really no excuse to not have quantifiable data and to have, sameness objectively as you go day to day. And that's where analyzers come in.
Of all the things you said, the couple that really stuck out to me are saving time and consistency. Those are important to me. And nobody's really going to offer me more money if I say, now I know how to use Smaart and I have a Smaart system and I can do this kind of measurements.
Right.
But if I can produce a more consistent result and maybe even faster because of these sort of optimized processes that I have through analysis, then hopefully that'll get me more work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what I found to be true. I mean, once I started getting really slick at system engineering and measuring systems and being able to do the same result I would have done, but now I can do it in 5 minutes. That's money for people, because then you become an indispensable asset to a production crew, because you can get that system, up. If it takes you an hour to get the system off the truck and in the air, that's one thing. But if it takes you 2 hours to get it to sound good, that's not so acceptable to me. So, if you're at a show or you're doing regional stuff, and I say this because this is sort of my background. I haven't done a major concert touring yet. Just regional stuff and then teaching as well. But if you get that system up in an hour and then tuned and ready to be used in 15 minutes, you're a hero. Because there's someone that's waiting to do a sound check, and they just flew in from Nashville or whatever, and they're trying to get to the hotel and get showered up and come back. They don't want to be hanging out all day waiting for some system tech to tune this instrument, so.
Chris, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making who are kind of new to using Smaart?
Showing up at work and assuming that they know what they're doing.
Okay. So they buy the software and they feel like that immediately makes them an expert or something.
Yeah, so it's you have to practice, and this is what I say in the classes too. It's like, don't leave this class and then open up the analyzer at your next show and assume that you're going to be able to do everything we did in class. It's just not going to happen that way. And you have to in a more controlled environment practice and get used to looking at the data. For an expert, an analysis expert, an optimization wizard, for a lot of us, we can look at, we know that we're getting good data, and we know how to recognize if it's good data or not. That's one key, and that comes with practice. Just looking at data over and over again and getting used to what good data is and what it is not, and then knowing where to go from there. And that's practice. It's just straight up practice. We can teach how to use the analyzer. We can teach to an extent how to interpret data, but you really need the context, that lexicon of prior knowledge, prior use of your own discovery to make that valuable. To be able to look at a single measurement position and say, my microphone's about 4 feet off the ground, so I'm obviously going to have some issues in the low mids because of the comb filtering that the microphone height's going to cause. Am I going to be able to look through that because what a 250 hertz comb filter looks like, and you can see the data through that, or are you going to create an average of positions and get measurement that looks more like the response of a loudspeaker with the ground reflections and various things more randomized out of the response? How long does that take you to do? I'm sort of ranting here, but what I'm trying to get to is saying that the biggest mistake I guess I see people making is being intimidated by the analyzer, not being comfortable with the analyzer, thinking that it's going to take them too long to set up or something like that. The difference between a professional and the amateur is how long it takes you to get actionable data, period.
So Chris, tell me how to practice. If I've just got Smaart and I want to practice outside of a show, what are some of the first steps I can do? Or maybe what's something I can do on a regular basis to really improve my skills and my speed?
If you don't have a external system processor or a way to get EQ, level, delay, polarity in an output of a system, that's one thing that you're going to need. So, I carry around a system processor when I'm doing freelance gigs. We have system processors in our Smaart class. That's part of the deal, and that's your tool to make action on a system. That's where the tool lives. That's where the adjustments are made. That's also sort of a BS statement, because there's so many decisions that are made before you get to the optimization that determine how well the optimization goes.
Okay.
Like is the install good? Are the speakers aimed where they need to be and placed correctly? Is the wiring correct? All that sort of stuff. That system verification If that stuff's not done, then it makes the optimization part difficult. But this isn't really answering your question, which is how do I practice? And my answer to that would be, well, just do you have a couple speakers? Do you have any equipment at all that you can get access to?
Yes.
And if you do,
let's say I have a couple of speakers at home that I can access, or I can go to the warehouse and use their system processor and a couple of speakers.
Right. Set that stuff up. Set up 2 full range speakers next to each other and splay them apart and find where they are equal level in that seaming, and try to time their seam, or try to get 2 different loudspeakers of different manufacturers, different types, and make them match. Try to match their response, and then try to add them together and see what you have to do in terms of time domain to make them work reasonably well together. If you can take 2 different speakers, what my mixer friend Eric Rogers, he calls it PA salad. How many people work for shops that are all Meyer sound houses, or all D&B houses, or all L Acoustics houses? I mean, that's like the 1%ers, For a lot of the people that are in my classes, they're regional guys, they're freelance guys. They may not own any gear, or they may be using someone else's gear all the time. So
they're using different stuff every day.
Yeah, and you may get into a situation where the sound company's got a brand new line array system because they just they upgraded for the year, but they haven't upgraded anything else in their inventory. So now your front fills are from the system by a different manufacturer that they were using 10 years ago, and that's what they use. And so the front fills and the main system have no business playing together out of the box, but it's your job to make them work together. And so how do you do that? And that's where practice comes into play, because if you know exactly what to look for and how to make that happen conceptually and then practically through the use of practice, then when you actually get your hands on a system where you have to do that, it's just a matter of decision-making process to get to that end goal, and you already know where you're going. So again, this comes back to the know your destination, and then enter your directions and just follow the steps.
Chris, one of the most common questions I get is how to save time in sound system tuning. Now, you already mentioned that practicing and being able to set up quickly will save me a lot of time. And we talked about, kind of knowing our destination, so we're not kind of wasting a lot of time. Aside from that, are there any other kind of time-saving techniques or shortcuts that you can share with us, or that you use when you go out and do work?
Depending on the scale of the job determines how much homework I may or may not do. So if it's a system commissioning for like a 36 loudspeaker club, some sort of hall or whatever, part of the homework before you even show up is looking at the CAD drawings, looking at the design of that system, and determining where you're starting and where you're ending and what your target is. So I actually have a worksheet in Excel that starts off with the left side are all the systems, and so whenever I get something like that, I start off like, what's the main system, and then that's where you start, and then you work down out throughout the venue to all the secondary systems. And then to the right, I have your response adjustments, so high pass filters, low pass filters, and then any equalization, and then level adjustments, and then polarity, and then time. And so it's basically a checklist, your response, level, polarity, time checklist for each system as you work through. And so there's absolutely no room for what's next. You know what I mean? So you know exactly where you're going and what part of the task you're working on. And so that way, as you work through systems, you're going through it in order, and there's a clear pathway to when you're done. And if it's not such a complex system, then it's just, start off, if it's a concert left-right system, do left and right sound the same. If left and right sound the same, if you can go left, right, and they're the same, then you've already saved half your time, because anything you do to one side, you can just copy to the other.
Nice. So far it sounds like the more pre-planning I can do, so that I can, when I get into the room, I can remove all of the time that I would normally spend navigating, thinking about what to do next, that'll be a big time saving, because then you can just go
can't stress that
task,
enough.
action, and not be thinking about what do I do next? Oh wait, what did I already do? Wait, where am I?
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's sort of the process that I teach in smart classes, and Jamie does as well. First thing you do is, does it work? System verification. Does it work? And then work on your main systems. And it's worth spending a little bit of extra time on the main systems, because once you get the main system knocked in, that dictates everything else, because everything else is set relative to the main. And I'm talking specifically more about concert sound systems. But even if you're in a club or something where there isn't necessarily a artist or something that you need to direct the attention to, and I'm talking about delay systems versus relay systems, that sort of thing. And this goes back to what I mentioned previously, having the design to align. Everything you do upstage of actually showing up and opening up the analyzer really determines the success that you'll have once you're on site, in situation.
Chris, can we talk about microphone placement for main sub alignment?
Well, before we talk about that, what's the assumption of the main and sub configuration? Is the mains flown, or the subs stacked? Are they stacked on top of each other? Are the mains flown with the subs, or?
Oh, so many questions. Okay, so the way I thought we would approach this is talk about two of the most common system configurations we see. And for me, I think that would be your left-right flown main and your left-right stacks of subs, and then your left-right flown main and your center subs. Do you agree that that's not the best or what we want, but kind of the two most common things we see out there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I run into that all the time. In fact, there's a show that I had to do recently where I started off with a nice, delay arced center cluster of subs with the flown mains, and then they started setting up tables in front of the stage, and then I got told that I had to move my subs to left right because there's VIP seating in front of the stage. That was interesting.
Interesting, he says.
And that was after sound check, so the engineer shows up and goes, what happened? And I said, I don't know, man, talk to the people up there that paid $3,000 a ticket. So But first of all, there's some things to just get out of the way, right? Sure. So if you've set your subs up left, right, then you have already made a decision that you don't care about coverage. Okay? Mm-hmm. So there's one thing so already where you place the microphone is going to determine whether you get subs there or not, or what level of subs you get there. I'm talking about the power alley aspect of subs, left-right subs. If you have subs in the center and you've done nothing to compensate for the buildup in the center of the subwoofer array, and this depends on how long that array is, you could have yourself some other problems, such as an unhappy artist or unhappy people in the front row because the sub is just nauseatingly loud in that sort of configuration. Also, with a horizontal center cluster, again, and the length of that line sort of determines this, but do you need sub coverage off center of the stage? Are you going wide? Because if you are, then that array is not going to do it for you.
So there are obviously various considerations concerning the sub array itself. So I think maybe we should just scale back a little bit so we can focus on microphone placement. So let's say that there's only one sub.
Sorry, yeah. So
maybe that would be easier to talk about.
Yeah, and you're sort of getting a window into how I think about this stuff too, because I want to think about everything before I even open the analyzer, and
sure.
And what are the considerations that I have to make, because ultimately it's just a management of compromises. So what is the best thing we can get out of this? And so when you talk about a sub on the ground and mains in the air, you've uncoupled them, and so you've think of it as a triangle. So if you're standing at front of house, your subs are on the ground, that's one leg, your mains are in the air, that's the other leg, and then the hypotenuse of the triangle would be the top of the mains to you. Mm-hmm. So where you stand changes the relationship. The leg from the sub to the main doesn't change. Those are fixed. That's a fixed point. But geometrically, imagine how the hypotenuse changes versus the floor leg as you walk to or from the stage. And that also changes the relative arrival point of the bottom of the mains versus the top of the sub. So,
just remind me, the hypotenuse of the triangle is the longest leg, or that
correct.
Connects the center? Okay.
It's what connects the two legs. So, and that's my understanding. So it's like you have the one leg, two leg, and then a hypotenuse that connects them. So,
in a right triangle, the side opposite the right angle is called the hypotenuse, and the other two sides of the right triangle are called the legs.
What I look for with subwoofer alignment is primarily, where's the person that can do the most damage at, and that's generally the mix position. And hopefully it's a good mix position. If it's not, it's not. These things happen, but get that timing there, and always time through the crossover. So I'll be phase aligned. When I'm talking about subwoofer timing, I'm talking about phase alignment, and so we may be in time and in phase from the acoustic crossover, as well as an octave and a half up and an octave and a half down. So really, no matter where you are in that venue, you're going to be within 90 degrees of either of those systems, which is summation. So whether you get perfect 6 dB summation at front of house, or you get 4 dB of summation somewhere else, or 3 dB somewhere else, no one's going to leave the show going, man, that was pretty good, but I really could have used 3 dB more at 80 hertz. It's one of the reasons why I'm able to work fast too, is because you take what you can change and know the difference between what you can affect and what you can't. And the only way that you can make that alignment point better is if you couple the subs and the mains. And sometimes it's not an option to fly the subs with the mains, or ground stacking is not an option, or whatever. So it's just again, management of compromise.
From what you said so far, it sounds like the ideal position in the horizontal plane for main sub alignment is at front of house.
For me, if it's a show that there's a lot of people at and there's one guy mixing, that's where I'll put it. If it's a dance, and again, this is subjective too. Like there's depending on the aesthetic you're going for. I mean, if it's an EDM thing, I might time the subs to like where the bulk of the audience is going to be, so that they get the biggest buildup, and then the front of house guy isn't feeling nauseous. As a rule of thumb, I usually time the subs where the front of house position is, because that's what can do the most damage.
And then in the vertical plane, are you doing head height, ground plane?
Usually about head height. I mean, thinking about the wavelengths that we're looking at for subtiming, you're not going to get into too much trouble if you're on the ground or in the air. Either way, the wavelengths are pretty long. So, what's a few samples amongst 100 cycles? It's really not that much of an impact. And ultimately, I'm looking in the phase response for trend. You end up with perfect timing at the crossover frequency, but I'm doing it by having phase alignment throughout the crossover region. So the height of the microphone doesn't really impact those frequencies as much as if you're doing a high frequency broadband system.
Chris, tell me about the tools you have in your work bag. What do you take out with you when you go to do a tuning or a show?
Sure. I usually have about a half dozen Y cables, and that's just to split off of various systems if I need to investigate something. What is the output of this channel actually doing? That sort of thing. 4 or 5 measurement microphones that I carry around, all different types. So. And that's just because if it's raining outside and I have to get some work done, I'm not going to take out my Earthworks S30. I'm going to use my Behringer ECM cheaper microphone, that sort of thing. Of course, once the show starts, I'm going to put the S30 up at front of house because that's the shiny one that people will recognize.
Okay.
But
Sure.
When I'm doing a system tech gig and some front of house engineer walks up, they don't necessarily know me. I want to put them at ease as soon as I can that it's going to be a good day for them. And I'm not going to do that by introducing myself as, product manager and Smaart Instructor guy. That's corny and seems sort of boastful. So, I just do it in other more subtle ways. I have Smart running, and showing data, and I'll have, the earthworks open, so they'll see like, oh, like obviously this kid cares because he cared enough to buy an earthworks. That's a pretty serious investment for someone. So, and then if they ask me questions about anything, I'm able to explain them and show them data. Back to the tools in my kit. So Y cables, microphones. I carry a PC with me. I carry a PC because there's a lot of stuff out there that is PC only, and I don't at all like having Parallels or VMware or switching operating systems on my Mac. I just don't like that workflow. I much prefer to have a separate computer controlling what needs to be controlled in the PC realm. It's much more stable for me, and then that way I don't have to switch, views. I can keep Smart open on my Mac and do whatever changes I need to do in my PC. And so that's sort of an indispensable tool. Microphone calibrator for calibrating for SPL, and then after that, I usually have a microphone stand. So Manfrotto is the lighting company. Manfrotto makes these stands that are very collapsible. So I have a stand that's called I believe it's called a micro stand, and it folds down, and it only gets to be about 5 feet high.
Oh, wow.
But it folds down to about half the size of the length of a standard 1510 Pelican.
So I guess you're not using that one to do standing head height.
No. But I will take averages with that, and it's a great cedar height, and it's a great, thing to have. That way, I don't have to go source a microphone to make some measurements, microphone stand, so it's just keeps me consistent. And then what else? I carry a Smart I/O, which is just a 2-channel interface, and it just happens to be a Smart I/O, but it could be any 2-channel interface, and that's just my quick and dirty sort of. I need some measurements. I'm going to plug this thing in, get some stuff quick, and then a handful of shorter XLR cables and different patch cables, and then all sorts of adapter cables. Any adapter cable you can imagine, or adapter connector.
Anything I can imagine?
Pretty much. I'm not really exaggerating there. I've got a bag, and it's filled with barrels and TRS to XLR and all sorts of RCA to whatever, different,
What about like Phoenix to RJ45?
I have Phoenix to XLR. I do not have Phoenix to RJ45.
I don't know what that would be for. I'm just testing.
I don't think that's a thing, but I do have Phoenix adapters to both male and female XLR, which then I can adapt the XLR end to a barrel to be whatever I need it to be. So it's all in there, and I've had situations where I've been the lifesaver because I'm the only guy on this site that has an adapter to get to whatever, and that's just part of my kit. That's if you're a system tech, part of your job is to be able to get at stuff,
Yep.
access different points. I've got a handful of, I think I have 4 cables that are about a foot long, and they're just polarity inversion cables.
Right. If you don't have enough system processing channels, that might be the only way.
Yeah, and that's that. I was working on a rig with the company last summer, and all of the low mid amps were out of polarity from the mid range amps on their system. So, I just went and I was like, what? I'm just gonna go right to the amp racks, and I changed the analog signal from positive to negative polarity, and the system got back the energy at 300 cycles or whatever that it was missing, and boom, so.
Did you make those cables?
Yeah.
Cool.
A lot of the stuff I have is made.
You just wired some XLR cables out of polarity.
Yeah, you just take one end off and switch it around and put it back on.
So Chris, can we go back for a second? Which microphone calibrator do you have, and what is it for?
I use the iSemcon SC1 calibrator. It gives you a 1K sine tone at a known reference level, and so that level is either 94 dB SPL or 110 dB SPL, and that's used. I'll use that after I'm done tuning a loudspeaker system. After I'm done tuning a system, I'll calibrate a microphone for SPL with that and then that will be the, sort of monitoring the show microphone. What are the levels, and that microphone will generally be at front of house, wherever the mix position is.
And that way, I guess you can, well, one of the features of Smaart, we haven't gotten even really into talking about Smaart that much, but one of the features of Smaart now is that you can continuously log whatever flavor of SPL that you want throughout the entire show, right?
Yeah, it's really great. And there, there's an SPL history graph now. There's a bunch of new stuff, some warning indication lights, alarm levels, that sort of stuff. Just to plug it, the 8.2 update of Smaart. So we're in version 8, and we're in the second major update, so 8.2. It's an SPL, basically an overhaul. And so when we designed 8, we knew that we wanted to have more SPL features. It just was one of those things that, we'll get 8 out and then we'll revisit this. And so 8.2 is the opportunity to really blow up those features and make Smaart a really great tool for SPL monitoring, as well as real-time frequency and impulse response measurements.
And tell me about your Smaart setup. So you've got the Smaart IO, which now I understand is discontinued, right? So are you going to keep using that one, or do you have another multi-channel interface you use?
I'll use the Smaart IO until it doesn't work anymore. It's great, because it integrates with Smaart, so I can control the gain from it. So, for me, I'll just take that IO and I'll show up at a show and I'll put it in the doghouse of a console, whatever my console is, and I'll close the lid on the doghouse, and there's just a USB cable dangling out, and I forget about the IO until I have to pack up. So I like that I can just kind of put it away and it's running in the background. And I don't have to access it because the controls are accessible from the interface of Smaart. The other I/O that I use would be the Roland Octacapture. And that also has a control panel that I can access from. It's the Roland application on Mac or PC. So sort of same idea. I can set up this interface. It doesn't really matter, if I can reach it or not, because I'm going to control it from my computer.
So Chris, we were talking about the kind of the SPL measuring features that were updated in version 8.2. And I know you talked a lot about this at your recent visit to NAMM. So I was wondering if you could just kind of give us an overview of what you learned during research and what you presented during your talk there.
Sure. So one of the things that came up that I thought was super interesting was the idea of nuisance monitoring versus voluntary monitoring. What the distinction would be is if you've signed up to be in a venue, if you're the performer, if you're the audience, if you're staff, you basically chose to be there, whether or not you chose to because it's your job or you chose to because you like being there, you signed up for it. And so you're a voluntary listener. And so the alternative would be an involuntary listener, right? So nuisance monitoring. You have a house in the neighborhood of a venue, and every Saturday night at 10:30, 11 o'clock when you want to go to bed, you can't because there's this low frequency rumbling and it's vibrating your floors and thus making it difficult to sleep. Nuisance monitoring is basically low frequency measurement. For the most part, and this would be C-weight or A-weighted SPL measurements. Whereas voluntary monitoring, people that chose to be there, that's A-weight measurements. Is this causing damage? Are we getting towards the threshold of pain for people? And so you can, in a lot of ways, monitor the nuisance measurement in the venue and keep that under control, and that will solve problems outside of the venue. It's much harder to solve problems outside of the venue if you aren't doing anything inside to reduce those problems. And what I mean is, if you know that whenever the C-weight or Z-weight measurement in a venue gets to be X level, say 126 dBc, then complaints start calling in. Then the cops start getting interested. Okay. So if you can monitor that C-weight in the venue and make sure that you don't go above that threshold of where the neighborhood starts to complain, then you've effectively fixed that problem.
So what I need to know is at what level the neighbors will complain, and then relatively what level that is inside the venue where I'm actually measuring all day long.
Right. And the reason why I say that, because if you look at the laws for America as far as SPL go, there's not really, for the most part, any I'd say very strict laws. They're pretty loose.
Well, there's definitely no national standard like in other countries, right?
Yeah. So the regulations are basically county based, city, maybe in a shed in a city may have its own regulation only for the surrounding area of that venue, that sort of thing. And looking at different regulations in the States, for example, Los Angeles, the level can't be above 95 dB A-weighted at any position that is normally occupied. It's like, what does that mean? Like seriously? Because if a crowd of people talking is 95 dBA, or louder if they're applauding. In Seattle, there's actually no defined level. It's just from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., any audible sound inside of a residential area would be considered a violation.
Oh, wow, that's a nuisance.
Right, nuisance. And so how do you, you're not going to measure that A weight. That's a C weight. That's a low frequency measure. That's the boop, 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 boop. That kind of stuff that's getting out into the neighborhood.
That's that low frequency that can make it through walls and around trees. And
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Air is a low pass filter. So, even really loud outdoor shows, the high frequency is going to die off. The degree at which the low frequency dies off in comparison is not going to match, So my takeaway too was measure A weight and C weight. You should be looking at both in a venue or as you're working. And A weight, not only to get an idea of what you're doing, but also to get an idea of where you're going. So, if I start a show off at 98 dBA, 106 dBc or whatever, I don't want to end too far away from there. Getting louder and louder and louder. And this is sort of my philosophical approach to sound as well. Like I'm a subtractive mixer. If you can't hear the guitar, it's probably because something else is in the way, not because the guitar needs to be louder necessarily. Same thing with the vocal. It's like if you can't hear the vocal, well, hopefully it's loud and its gain is appropriate. But if you can't hear it, maybe there's something else that's in the way of it. You can turn that down. That keeps me at a reasonable level where, by the end of the show, maybe I'm still at 98, 106. But the clarity is pristine because I've spent the show taking out the junk and really focusing on the art of it, not just brute force. It needs to be loud so you can hear everything. If I end the show at 103A, 110C, then I know that I've crept up quite a bit, and that is probably not going to sound as good as if I had been more careful about the decisions I was making to maintain a consistent level.
So, Chris, at what point is this my responsibility? At what point is this something I need to worry about as a sound engineer or a system tech? If I'm on tour, I'm going to play anywhere. Mm-hmm. Do I need to be researching this stuff? Is this another thing I need to prepare for? Or can I just kind of be reactive and wait till maybe a venue manager comes and says to me, like, hey, this is a known situation. Here's the number you need to be aware of. Like, how does that work? I've never been in that situation where someone has told me about that limit or that being something to worry about.
You want to be able to, after a complaint, show what was happening. Show the data, show that you're within whatever tolerance. And you also want to, before complaints, be logging this, be monitoring this stuff so that you are aware of what you're going at. So, when someone comes up to you at front of house and says, hey, it's too loud, you can be like, well, I'm not pushing it too loud. Where are you standing? Oh, well, I'm standing right in front of the subwoofer stack. It's like, well, yeah, of course it's too loud for you. Don't stand there. There's gonna be a sign somewhere. The local house guy is gonna, if there is a law, they're gonna tell you. And this is more common in Europe, obviously. There'll be posted signage. As far as in Americas, if you don't have a limit, I take it upon myself to just not be a jerk, to just be appropriate for the genre, be appropriate for the audience. If it's a young crowd and you're doing Waka Flocka Flame or something like I did last April, that crowd wants tons of energy. They want loud, they want big bass, they want it, and they're young, and I'm okay to give it to them, so that show ended up riding at like 116, 115 C.
Yes.
And A way it was about 98 to 103 at front of house. So as you get closer, it's a little bit louder, but there's 3,000 people there to soak up that energy and have a good time. If it were a blues show and everyone was in there, and I'm not saying that blues is a genre for old people, but that show ran much lower level. It's just because that crowd doesn't want to hear it. And I don't want to make people mad. Ultimately.
So Chris, it sounds like maybe your suggestion for me would be, if I want to be safe, I should just always log. That way, if a complaint ever comes in, I can look at the time of the complaint, compare that to my log and the position of that person and where my measurement microphone was, and see if I can draw any information from that. Like, yes, I did need, it was too loud at that point, or that didn't have anything to do with me.
Yeah, I mean, and the data is easy to get, once you have the gear to set up to do it. So it's the text file. It's not much going on there. So I just look at it. I don't see any bad to doing it. There's a lot of reasons I can justify monitoring SPL. I can't think of a reason not to.
So Kevin from Facebook says, is he using FIR filters and IIR filters in his live sound tuning? Does he believe there is a future in their applications for an end user system tech?
Well, of course I'm using IIR filters. I mean, that's just a digital modeling of an analog parametric filter, as far as I know. So, those are obviously that's an indispensable tool. As far as FIR filters go, in the field, that's not something that I'm going to do at a system tuning, especially when time is a constraint. Usually that involves opening up another program that does the FIR filter coefficient calculation and then importing that into the system processor that you're using for a system. Whether or not you even have a system processor that's capable of loading FIR filters. The processor I use now has a filter that's called a phase filter that I might play with depending on how things are going. If I'm working with different speakers of different manufacturers, for like example main and front fill, I might try to tweak the front fill system to better match the main system if it's not really happy everywhere. But time is a serious issue in a lot of these situations for me. So
yeah, one of the things you mentioned at the beginning was one of the big differences between you being a hero or a zero may be just a matter of time if you get that thing set up and happy in 2 hours or 15 minutes. Yeah,
exactly. And I don't want to take time away from someone else, and ultimately at the end of the day, the front of house engineer or someone, he's not going to be upset that 10K is out of phase by 30 degrees from 1K. Okay. So you move on.
Okay, Kevin had a couple more questions. Has he seen FFT system tuning techniques being accepted by a wider audience of engineers in recent years?
I would say accepted isn't necessarily the word. I would say expected. Once you get to a certain level, if you're not using all the tools you have available, you're sort of just an amateur. I'm not saying that, obviously there's been years of prior experience of people that didn't use analyzers, but as we go, as systems get more capable and more consistent, and you're really just verifying everything's working correctly in a lot of ways, and the fastest way to do that is with a tool that will help you along the way. As people, aspirational people that want to get to that next level, they look at what are the professionals doing, what are the top engineers doing, and they're all using dual channel FFT analyzers.
And it's interesting that you mentioned time earlier too, because I think as systems get smaller and become easier to set up, and people kind of understand them more and how to get to an end result quicker, I think that is one of the reasons it's becoming more accepted or maybe more seen. So you were talking about how you see at the top levels, maybe at a certain level, I think you used the word certain, at a certain level, at a professional level, it's expected. And now I think we're seeing that certain level go to smaller and smaller and lower budget shows because it's fast.
It's approachable. It's approachable too. I mean, it's not like you have to buy a $30,000 measurement rig. I mean, you can field a basic measurement system. If you already have a computer, then it's just the cost of the software and a microphone. You might already have a preamp. I mean, you can get a measurement rig out there pretty cheap. The expensive part is the time you put into understanding what the heck you're doing, and the training that you might pay for and all that. If you ever look at job postings for live sound companies, regional companies or whatever, I always see, in the qualifications, that you have attended a smart training class or have, an experience in dual channel measurement. I mean, I've seen this in a lot of...
I have never seen that. That makes me so happy because until today, Chris, I've always told people this is not going to make you more money. This is for you and you alone so you can do your job better. But maybe things are changing now.
I would disagree. Yeah, I've seen it many times where if a company is looking for a system technician, that's part of the skill set for a system technician is being able to operate a measurement analyzer. Also, you definitely get paid more. I mean, before I was working for Rational Acoustics, I wasn't as hip to measurement as I am now. For obvious reasons. My ability to make a little bit more money for both Rational or myself if I'm freelance has gone up just because of my ability to use an analyzer to get good work done fast.
Okay, I like it. These are good results. Well, let's talk more about this. Is he excited about any specific developments in the world of system processing or speaker design that will make system design and system teching easier?
Well, if you ever go to the industry trade shows, you'll see.
Which you have.
Yep. There's a lot of manufacturers that are pushing towards this immersive audio experience, where you have more than left right. Basically, that left right is passe or whatever. So manufacturer systems that have advanced processing algorithms where they'll actually track a performer along a stage and have multiple loudspeaker hangs so you can really localize the audio source or it's pretty interesting stuff. I don't want to name specific manufacturers, but if you're hip to this, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. There's some manufacturers are getting more advanced with their tools, their deployment tools. That makes everyone's lives easier, where you don't have to figure out, what the pick-off points for an array has to be to get the coverage you're looking for. Or, you can input into a manufacturer's whiz-bang magic box how many speakers you're using, and they'll already compensate for, low-frequency buildup or, things like these. Another thing that's interesting is... maybe a triangulation, way of having a microphone for where the coverage should stop, a microphone where the coverage should start, and then a microphone, in a loudspeaker, and a system processor provided by the manufacturer that's able to tailor the coverage for the start and stop points. That's another development that I've seen in the last few years. It's really interesting.
Oh, cool. And you're not talking about a column array that's then aiming the sound. You're talking about just a single speaker. I guess you're trying to be general because there's multiple products. Right. This
particular, the one I'm talking about, is a sort of a column principle. It's a flat hung, large format PA system. And they use our Smart API to input the data into their signal processor. And touching on that's another thing that's been really interesting to see in the past few years. The adoption rate of our application programming interfaces into various manufacturers' speaker processors, where they can acquire measurement data in their own environment. Because the assumption is that the person teching the system probably already has Smart running. So it just streamlines their process, and that's been really great.
So Jonathan wants to know basically what are some new communication features coming out next with Smart. He asks about OSC. He asked about gain tracking and optic capture. What can you tell us about Smaart and, I guess, APIs?
Sure. Well, I can tell you for sure, but by the time this is published, we will have integrated the Roland Octacapture control into Smaart.
Oh, what does that mean?
So it basically just means you can control the gain, phantom power, and polarity of an input of the Octacapture within the Smaart environment using the built-in input meters in Smaart, version 8. It's part of the version 8.3 update, which is in beta currently, but probably by the time this is released, it'll actually be it'll be available for download. Gain tracking, we will be adding that as well. It won't be at the initial release though. That'll be a rev update. And we look to add other interfaces as well. We're just happen to be starting with a Roland because it's a fairly common interface used by a lot of folks in the field. They already have them. The API, we've also updated the API to broadcast input meters, broadband meters, as well as SPL information. As more companies are adopting our API, we want to be able to give them as much information as they may need from our interface.
The benefit of controlling the audio interface from within Smaart is just a more streamlined workflow.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
It's just so you don't have to leave the environment.
So Rory asked how to measure and read tonality or timbre of loudspeakers. For example, at a crossover frequency, true drivers playing the same tone at the same magnitude and phase sound completely different. So he goes on to explain a little bit more, but it's kind of this question of, can we really measure quality between two different speakers and say this one's good and this one's bad?
I think it's really a subjective thing, and I'm sure that you and others have worked on the same system and had it sound really, really, really good with one operator and really, really bad with another operator. So it depends. I'll give a couple examples from a couple other Smaart instructors. Jim Woods, our Spanish instructor, or Spanish language, he lives in Madrid. He said to me, at one point that a good engineer can make a bad system sound good, and a great engineer can make a good system sound great. And excellent engineer can make a great system sound absolutely transcendent. And
Okay.
So it's really who's driving. Another one of our instructors, Alexandros Ratmanosis, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. Sorry, Alex, if I pronounce that wrong. But he's asking me this question recently, where a loudspeaker manufacturer developed this speaker system, same components, two different box designs, measured exactly the same, but one of them just sounded so much better, and it's just why you can't measure it, and it's like, well, who knows? I mean, we can throw darts at the board and say, well, maybe this one has a bigger internal cabinet volume, or this the way this one's designed, the cab resonance enhances the low mid better than the other one, whatever. There could be various things. I guess the question is, this is why we have loudspeaker demos, right? Because speakers measure the same, but you got to listen to them, and there's other qualities that go into a system that make the purchasing decision that maybe have nothing to do with the audio quality of that system.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess if every feature of experiencing sound in a room could be captured displayed on a graph, then we wouldn't need to have speaker demos.
Yeah, exactly. And does this speaker rig well? How fast does it take to deploy the system? What is the ecosystem of the speaker operating? Does it have the ability to replace components quickly, or is it self-powered and not self-powered? I mean, there's so many other things that go into, is a speaker good, that may not have to do with its sound quality. Does it have a good return on an investment? I know this isn't really helping Rory's answer, but
It's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of factors that go into
Your emotional connection to that speaker could have to do with its return on investment and how quickly
man, 100%,
it deploys. Sure.
Yeah, like I really like this manufacturer because I really like the people behind this manufacturer, and so I buy their products because I support their people. And sure, there might be another speaker manufacturer that has a better sounding box or a better solution for the product I want, but their support isn't as good. So you go with the people.
Russell asks, what does he always recommend as the absolute minimum you should do? Which steps should you never, ever leave out? I'm guessing he's talking about your sort of alignment process.
Your flow, yeah. System verification is the first step. Are the outputs going where they should be? And, to that point, maybe you just go left, blast some pink noise, right, blast some pink noise, and do they sound the same? And one of the reasons why pink noise is such a darn good stimulation source or excitation source is because we can listen to it. We can walk the coverage of a speaker playing pink noise and listen to how it's working, where things are cutting off, where coverage is dropping, the consistency of coverage. You can't do that with a sweep, or a sine sweep. And with music, you can, but music is dynamic, so it's not sort of, the sort of steady nature of pink noise gives you the ability to really compare better.
Yeah, it should be boring.
Yeah, so that's my first thing. Do system verification. Do the systems are they on, and do they sound the same? Does left sound like left? Does right sound like right? After that, depending on how much time you have or your ability to work quickly, this is why I have a blank plate on my drive rack that says Chris Tsanjoures Smart Ninja.
Okay.
Because a lot of this stuff, if you're under a time constraint, or you have to be sort of stealthy about how you're doing things, so you may just get the left-right system sounding the same and at the appropriate level or sensitivity for the production. And then as things are happening, you sort of go in and you match up the fills or out fills and do the delay timing maybe by ear or something, because you just need to get it sort of close, and it's not an installed show, so it's going to just have to be rock and roll and make it happen. If alignment can take as much time as you have, so if it's an installation or a theater or something like that, you may take a little bit more time as long as you have it.
Chris, where is the best place for people to follow your work online?
If you are subscribed to the Rational newsletter, you are absolutely going to see where I'm teaching and when.
There is a Smart Users Facebook group where it seems like you're fairly active.
Yeah, well, I'm a moderator of that group, so I'll post up stuff on that and make sure that's running smoothly. That's the Smart Users.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us on Sound Design Live.
Thanks, man. It was a real pleasure.
Sound Design Thanks to the band It Prevails for all of the music in this episode. If you want to find more of their music, you can get it over at facebook.com/itprevails. And that's Chris playing guitar in all those tracks. Now, I know we covered a lot of stuff in today's episode, and if you were driving, you probably didn't have time to take notes. In fact, you probably shouldn't have been taking notes. Don't worry, I took notes for you, and you can get all of them over at sounddesignlive.com. Sound Design Live is supported by Bob and Ellis, and you can start supporting the show today for as little as $1 per episode over at patreon.com/sounddesignlive.